Hello. We're going to start here on YouTube and Zoom. I am getting the YouTube sharing set up. Oops, I gotta do the mute sound over there. After 3 weeks of retreat, I need to refigure out the tech. Let's see. Oh, good to see you, Hayden. Let's see here. Yeah, it looks like the interface for Zoom has changed while I was away. I don't see how that I put myself, here, pin myself is here. Got it. All right. Now we're technically, well, after winter retreat, we're going to see if we can set up a tech team to help alleviate some of this each time that the monastic has to go through. In the meantime, here we are. I do have it now sharing on YouTube. Over my 3-week retreat, I did kind of a deeper dive into the concept of sanya, perception. And over the next few weeks, I thought we might work with that. But this week, maybe we'll do more of, way back in high school when I did swim team. I loved that dive that goes into the pool that's kind of shallow and rides the top. So today we might do a little bit of that shallow dive to kind of see the breadth of the topic. And then in the coming weeks, we'll go deeper into how we work with it and how it informs our practice more and more. So I'll start with the Namo Tassa, and then I'll try a different form of screen sharing, and we'll navigate tech again. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sangham Namasami. And right there, that's a perception shift that we can do. When we hear those words, it can help put us into the Dhamma stream of perceptions. So I actually was glad to remember to start with that this week. Okay, I'm going to try to do a desktop screen share and see how Zoom does that. So, question for you, are you seeing kind of a couple layers of windows, but the top one says unbinding? Excellent. All right. So the sutta that's kind of our springboard on our lap swim today is the sutta called, let me pull it up on the one that includes the Pali, the Nibbana Sutta. So I'm sure that most of you watching have heard that word, Nibbana. And here, Bhikkhu Sujato is translating it as extinguishment. Here, Thanissaro Bhikkhu is, Venerable, is translating it as unbinding. And I think both of those are lovely ways to kind of get at this concept of all done. And the extinguishment is like our minds get hot. Our minds get hot, so it's the cooling, the ultimate cooling of the mind. And here, unbinding, our minds get tight. And so this is the unbinding, the unraveling. We'll get more into like what underlies this concept that we'll look at today of sanya, perception. So I'll read through Ajahn Thanissaro's version here to get the window set up so I can see it. There we go. You have to move it in such a way that all of the participants jump to the top of the screen, but then it keeps trying to jump down again. There we go. Excellent. And I understand that from your viewpoint, you're not seeing that part. You're seeing the underlying, but I get this layering happening here, which is kind of also like how our minds are. You can't assume that somebody else is seeing the same screen the same way. All right. So what's sweet about this sutta is it's between Venerable Ananda and Venerable Sariputta. So Ananda was the primary attendant for the Buddha for 20 plus years. And Sariputta was one of the top 2 disciples, the closest to the Buddha, and was one of them that the Buddha would say, if I'm not teaching, you should be teaching. So here we have Ananda going to have a friendly conversation with Sariputta. And I'll just read it in, it's a very short sutta, so we'll just read it in full. Then Venerable Ananda went to Venerable Sariputta, and on arrival exchanged courteous greetings with him. After an exchange of friendly greetings and courtesies, he sat to one side. So there's a friendliness there before they dive into the Dhamma, there is this relationality that happens. As he was sitting there, he said to Venerable Sariputta, "Friend Sariputta, what is the cause, what is the reason why some beings do not become totally unbound in the present life?" And I've definitely asked similar questions, that how come some of us are getting it and some of us aren't, and I don't really know where to place myself in this process of am I heading in the right direction, or am I left behind? And whoa, how come so many people on the planet can't see what's going on? And so this question comes up a lot. What is the reason why some beings do not become totally unbound? And here he's talking about the end goal for a Buddhist, the end goal of Nibbana. I'll not use the translation there so that we can have all of the multiple concepts that come up with that. And he also says, in the present life, because I think there are a lot of us practitioners who think, well, I probably am not going to get it this time, but maybe I'll set up the conditions for next time. So it includes this multi-life pursuit of the ending of pursuits. Why do some of us get it in this life and some not in this life? And Sariputta replies, "There's the case, friend Ananda," and here it's sweet, calling him friend, "where beings do not discern as it actually is present, that this perception has a share in decline. This perception has a share in stability. This perception has a share in distinction. This perception has a share in penetration. This is the cause. This is the reason why some beings do not become totally unbound in the present state." And we'll get into what the commentary says these 4 things are. Things that I'm not fond of sharing, but contribute to, lead to, direct towards decline, that direct towards a stability, that direct toward a distinction, and towards a penetration. Kind of works with a deep dive analogy. So, what is our balance in this? And are we declining, staying stable? Are we meeting the aims of this practice? And have we come to wisdom? And so then Ananda asks, and what, friend Sariputta, is the cause? What is the reason why some beings do become totally unbound in the present life? And like the suttas often do, it's, of course, the opposite of what we just said. There's the case, friend Ananda, where beings discern as it actually is present, that this perception has a share in decline. This perception has a share in stability. This perception has a share in distinction. This perception has a share in penetration. This is the cause, this is the reason why some beings become totally unbound in the present life. Okay, so we're looking at Sutta Centra here, but I copied the same content we just read from, I think it used to be called Access to Insight, it's now Dhamma something. You can click through and get to the current translations of Thanissaro Bhikkhu from Access to Insight. And so here we see perception as a share and decline, stability, distinction, penetration, and then there was a footnote. So I copied that over, and he doesn't cite the reference, but I'm fairly sure this is from the commentary. A perception with a share in decline is one that causes the mind to fall from concentration. A perception with a share in stability is one that helps to maintain concentration. And by concentration here, we're talking about the jhanas. A perception with a share in distinction is one that leads to higher stages of concentration, so maybe going through the stages of the jhana. And a perception with a share in penetration is one leading to liberating insight. So that would be the coming out of the jhanas and the insight that emerges when one turns one's mind in an appropriate way. So I collected some other suttas. We'll see if we have time for those. I'm going to go back now to Bhante Sujato's translation of the same sutta. We're back in Sutta Central. Today I'm also going to show a little bit of the tools. So I loved having the 3-week retreat, and I'm looking forward to another 3-week retreat in about 3 weeks. Suvijana's in hers now. It wasn't easy. There was a lot that was, emerging during that time, and this looking at the perceptions. What is that perceptive act that's happening? How is it conditioned? How does it impact? It was a wonderful practice, and so I collected a bunch of materials on this, and then meditated with them, and took them for a walk, and I highly recommend, don't just do the suttas for an hour on, once a week or a couple times a week. Do the suttas in your practice throughout the day. So here is it again on Sutta Central, different translation that we have the Pali next to it. And so I'm going to go down to the term here, fully extinguish. And we saw the unbinding in the other translation. That's Nibbāna. And what I like about this, I often really thought of Nibbāna as that, end of life of an arahant, as the final laying down of the khandhas. But it's also, it's the quenching and complete emancipation, complete cooling. So I'm distracted. I don't know if you can see out the door, the deer right there at the door looking in. So maybe we're in Deer Park today. Just walking away now. So yeah, the perception, deer, and then my mental filing cabinet. Oh yes, Isipatane, the Deer Park. It's just, this is the nature of the mind. Often it's a squirrel. Well, this time it's deer. Perception. There's eye contact. There's the seeing of it. Is that me turning and showing you the deer? Yes, it lightens the heart. Is it leading to a stability of mind? Maybe not. So we can have a real example right here of the difference between quenching and grasping after. So it does have the definition also of the death of the arahant, the final emancipation of not having the khandhas to be working with, because the dukkha remains in our khandha system even after a full enlightenment. And so then the lying down of the body at the end of life is kind of an ultimate relief, which is a different concept than other religious systems may have. And until one has real wisdom about it, it can seem a little bit scary, because really what we're wrapped up in with these perceptions is a perception of self. So many of these things that lead us away from that stability and cooling and emancipation is this click, I'm a me, and I need a this. And there's another deer. It's a beautiful morning. Yeah, we're very blessed to be living in a beautiful place. And so there's this other of behavior settling down, not distracting, cooling down, subsiding. This is the title, and it comes from this word Nibbāna. Let's see, we have. Yep, okay. I'm seeing in the chat that Kat in the Tacoma area has got deer there too. I'm sure that there are deer in the UK and other places as well, so we can all share and rejoice in and thinking of that association that the Buddha also used deer in his teaching and analogies. And I'm sure that there were plenty of bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, lay people at the time sitting at the roots of trees, and the deer would approach. So we're in good company. Okay, then I wanted to also show you here, so I'm going to read the part in English, this translation, and then just give you a little bit of the toolkit of how that I figure out what are the strokes for this swim we're doing. So here's Sariputta's reply. Reverend Ananda, it's because some sentient beings don't really understand which perceptions make things worse, which keep things steady, which lead to distinction, and which lead to penetration. And what I like about Sutta Central is the ability to click on, the words and get, a little bit of a translation here, but sometimes it goes a little amok. So here, sanya, but because it's got the T at the end, the algorithm has pulled up the wrong definition. You can get around it by, if you realize that's just not the right context. It's like, okay, so this word about family kin is not correct. I can flip over to the DPD, the Digital Poly Dictionary, and instead of having sanya T, I can do san. The word should be divided to sanya T, and the T is a quote. So if I go back down to the word sanya, then I can get the definitions within sanya. And in here, it's about our regard for, regarding, perceiving. It's the looking at, but there's this recognition factor that comes up. I'm recognizing. I look, deer, it's not there now, but deer, recognition. And so then I had Sobana when I was, I'd have been Anagarika novice, was talking about perception is like the old style filing cabinets, the manila folders, and you've got the papers in them and the little labels at the top. And so in comes this, I see a shape, coloration, there's a little dark spot at the beginning, and then these little darker and little points, and kind of what appears to be a fluffiness. And, so that's the initial eye making contact, seeing colors, shapes, light. And then what Sanya does is not just leave it at that, because otherwise there's nothing different between that and looking at a painting or something. Now, and I've also got the context of this kind of brown gray with well, see, I'm naming now moss. By looking at that object, I go into my filing cabinet, and the collection of brown gray modeled this, oh, tree with moss. And so it goes in, it pulls out the file with tree, and then all of the other papers in that file also come with it. And so there might be an emotional tone. I like trees. Oh, there's a whole deforestation happening around the planet. Oh, and so I start to spin out because my file is full of all of these associations. And so it's a signal. It's a signal when I see this tree, and then and tree with deer, whole bunch of others. So all of the associations that happen. But this is before we spin out into the next of the five khandas, where we start to see, to spin into volitional. I want to think about this. I want to think about, I want to consider, I'm going to pull in these other things. So that's when we get into the sankhara aspect. But at sanya, there's a whole constellation of things. Once there's been contact, pull out the file, and it can flush the body with sensations. It can, start the mind toward the door of proliferation. It's formulated by our experiences in the past. We're in the present with this perception. And there is that moment then to, if we've got enough sati, enough mindfulness to help direct, this is the one spot where I do like to bring in Bhante Sujato's translation of sankhara as choices. There is a little bit of a choice in the turning toward the volition, the intentionality of how do we follow through now that we've had this sanya. Okay, so this is another tool that I just wanted to bring out, this digital Pali dictionary that helps us to really unpack words more in its various forms. And then I'm going to jump over to, I put together a collection. Here's another tool that's very, very useful, is the digital Pali reader. It kind of has an older style. It was originally designed as, I think, a Netscape app. And so it's still got a little of that look to it. But I can do a search for sanya, and I can see how, sanya's got in all of these compounds, and then I can click through and see where they are. So just looking at the compound list, here's the perception of the mind, the perception of dukkha. Here is permanence, the perception of permanence, and we'll get into that. Each one of these compounds. So, and the number after it is how many times that particular word appears in. I've only clicked the mula, the root texts, but you could also do the commentaries and the sub-commentaries if you wanted to see, where does it appear in those parts of not just the canon, but also the commentary. Let's see. Yeah, so we've got perception of anger, perception over here, sila, sukha, subha. So this is a nice tool to see. You can see this is a really important concept. It appears in connection with many things throughout the suttas. And then when you click into a sutta, you can see, so nicca, sanyang, that would be permanent, the perception of permanence, sukha, sanya, the perception of something that's pleasant, atta sanya, that's me, it's me, I see me. So this is an interesting tool. Oh, yeah, here's patigha sanya, anger. And so that's one we can look at and we can say, am I perceiving this with a lens of anger? And this particular collection here that I just pulled up at first it was random. I thought, well, that's actually kind of a nice one to pull up. This is a lesser used part of the canon, the base Tipitaka. It's in the Khuddaka Nikaya, and it, let's see, basic passages. And, oops, nope, that's not what we wanted, sorry, back. The Khuddaka Nikaya is a collection of smaller, you'll find the Dhammapada, the Udana, Etivuddhika, so these are different collections. Sutta Nipata is one of the bigger parts in there. And then further down, the Therigatha, further down, we have here, there's all the Jataka tales, the path of discrimination. So that's what that particular list is. It just listed out a whole bunch of the perceptions that we have and that we need to be able to see clearly. It is a small book that's kind of Abhidhamma-like, but it's Sariputta is suspected to be the creator of this collection. And it's a collection of terms and concepts that we really need for a complete understanding of the Dhamma. And it's used really like the Theravadan aspects of the path. So it doesn't include so much of the bodhicitta in the path of the bodhisattva. Those ways of framing are you can use this text to say, is this really Theravadan in its early Buddhist text in its nature? Or is this something that maybe came later? So that's one of the things I look at this. Or if I just kind of want to see what else might be with this topic, I could go into this. And yeah, it's called the Treatises of Knowledge. I had queued it up, but it looks like when I restarted my computer, it popped it back to the top. So I'm not going to dig in here. But this is just showing you some of the resources that you can use to kind of fill out the picture when you start to delve into a topic as rich as perception. So let's see, we're about halfway through our time. So multiple, I listened to talks from Ajahn Brahmali, Aya Sudina, Bhikkhu Vimala Ramsi, a number of them, and several of them recommended this book. So this is also what I did as part of my deep dive, and I'm only partway through, it's so rich. Concept and Reality in Early Buddhist Thought. And this is a scholar monk out of Sri Lanka, and it's available in ebook online for free, Dana book. And it's had many republications because it's such a rich book. So you might actually be able to get a physical copy. I'd love to get one eventually, but I also like having the electronic form because then I can, put my own highlights and add little notes and things. But this would be a recommended, not an easy read. The languaging of it is pretty academic kind of, but rich. As Sivajana and I were talking about it, and she mentioned that when she was reading this, it was like the Pali, because it has the Pali and then the English within it, like the Pali, it's like there's almost like suddenly you're able to touch in and really understand, reading the Pali, it's like over time, the understanding is there. Just because we've had enough exposure, maybe in previous lives as well as this one. Okay, so for those of us who are joined a little bit later, we're looking today, and we'll look over the next few weeks at perception, sanya. And
Mm.
today I'm kind of doing more the shallow dive of like what are the resources and what are the areas of sanya that we could look at, and then we'll do more practice with it and the collection of suttas throughout the next few weeks. This is based on some of what came up during my retreat time. Okay, so that's specifically my tab collection on sanya. Well, that's interesting. There we go. So we're going to jump into a couple of other suttas today, and just kind of the next wading pool over to get at the concepts that are around perception. So this one is another super rich sutta. There's a great talk from many years ago by Ajahn Brahm on this one, Vipallasa. And Vipallasa it's kind of these perversions of our perceptive. What is it that we're misaligning our perception? So what we'll start to look into is alignment of our perception, training of our perception, conditioning of our perception. Because perception, as I talked earlier, is like reaching into your filing cabinet with a label and then pulling out a collection of things that your previous experiences have grouped together. And so with sati, mindfulness, we can begin to work through how filing cabinets just get messy. And I think it's even worse now that we've got the electronics, and we just, put it all on the device. I'll read that later. And they all kind of just get, Ayurveda also had this term, the night secretary. So if you come out of a dream and you're like, wow, where did all of that come from? How did my mind make that up? It was the night secretary on duty who didn't have the full filing system, but they came in and these papers left over from the day were on the desk. And so then they're like, well, what if I put it in this folder and just kind of those associations that come up during the night can be our dreamscape. But we're really doing that throughout the day. It's just that we've got a little bit more of the cognitive conditioning that helps catch it and go, that's a little bit far out there. Unless we have some sort of disorder of the mind that, which we all do until our huntship, that there are these perversions that come in and warp our perceptive capacity and warp our perceptive assumptions, I will say. So the vipallasas are some of the warping. And what are the ways that it warps? There are these 4 perversions of perception: perversions of mind, perversions of view. Which 4? Constant with regard to inconstant is a perversion of perception, a perversion of mind, a perversion of view. So constant, here we're talking about permanence, impermanence, anicca, thinking that something that is by its very nature impermanent has some longer stability to it, or any stability to it. Pleasant with regard to the stressful. So this is dukkha, that we're thinking something sukha, pleasant, in regards to something that's intrinsically dukkha. I noticed this during my retreat time where I wanted to distract myself at times, just distract from feeling, distract from, it's kind of a habitual impulse to go play a Sudoku or read something that's way off topic or daydream or, so this distractive tendency. And I had this, I was seeing the mistaken view that the distraction itself although there was a pleasant Vedana to it, there was also a dukkha to it. Now, I was out of alignment with, because it wasn't so much of an intentional, I'm going to go do this to, you know, it was more just impulse, and training that following of the impulse, which is different than a gut knowing. It's a not thinking I'm gone quality, and there's a dukkha in that. So this is one little way I was unpacking this particular perversion. And then the big one I mentioned earlier, self with regards to what is not self. So seeing a me in these things, attractive with regard to the unattractive. So these are the four ways that we can warp our perceptive, the lens we're on. So stage in my life, and many people I've talked to, that the time in your life where there's kind of a depressive haze over everything. So the perceptive lens, or I have a sibling with bipolar, and so I can imagine that when she's in the manic stage, that the lens is through this manic, the perceptions are have a different drive to them. And so there might be times in your life, or the rose, or maybe you've been in love. Your perceptions of your beloved have a particular lens, and there's the papancha that comes out of that. Oh, their eyes are like this, their skin is like this, their voice is like this. They do these activities, they're so wonderful. So we have a perceptive lens of attractive that we're looking through. And I'm not saying there aren't those attractive aspects, but they are an impermanent thing. And when you start to look at the actual eye or skin, skin, oh my goodness, it's not attractive when you start, it's texture, it's scent, there's this false, the dead skin flaking off, all of these things. So we have this perception, and it's societally overlaid, it's hormonally overlaid, it's our conditioning. Growing up, I had this message of find a husband, and so you have to put this overlay that's attractive, and in order to follow down that path. I'm not saying that there aren't times and appropriate places for this, but when we go to what we're talking about, extinguishment and unbinding, this is a warping of the pathway to get there. So perceiving constancy in the inconstant, pleasure in the stressful, self in what's not self, attractiveness in the unattractive, beings destroyed by wrong view, go mad, out of their minds, bound to Mara's yoke. From the yoke they find no rest. So earlier we were talking about how that Nibbāna is the stilling, the calming. So when you're caught up in these wrong views, you are caught in this yoke that you find no rest. Beings go on to the wandering on, leading to birth and death. So I'm not making a comment about, not wishing to come back and be with your loved ones again and these kind of things. That is a natural trajectory that we can take, and it can be a choice. But when you are aiming for the unbinding, the extinguishment, you start to understand that by skewing my perceptions in this way, this leads to continued rebirth. By writing my perceptions, then I have a chance to recondition myself for a peace that's much, much deeper. Okay, and we may go deeper into these suttas. Let's see, in the interest of time, I'm just gonna, this one, think has been covered here before, the Honeyball Sutta. It's another one very much delving into perceptions. And this is the note collection that the Clear Mountain Monastery is going through all of the suttas in the Majjhima Nikaya, one a week, and they put together kind of a study guide with it. And so I snagged this one, and I wanted, here we are. I'm gonna see if I can make that bigger. Yeah. So in this sutta, the sanya, the perception we're looking at, is papancha, another word that we really need to get acquainted with in our Buddhist life, is this proliferation, this like winding up, this following after, the mind going down. Ayachitananda and I call it the rabbit hole. Yeah, we'll write to each other, oh, yep, I went down the rabbit hole. So we're kind of accountability buddies sometimes. And you can have that shorthand of it's down the rabbit hole. So within this sutta, another word that we want to bring in is the anusaya here, anusaya, and that's the underlying tendency. So the vocabulary for today, we've got Nibbāna, we've got sanya, so the perceptions, then we've got the vipallasa, the kind of the perversions, and here we've got the anusaya, these underlying tendencies, which were baked in by getting these khandhas, and then also overlaid by our upbringing, our social, our past lives, and our lived experience. And so in this sutta, the way that our sanya can be lenses as we look out at the world is these notions, so bhikkhus. As to the source through which perceptions and notions born of mental proliferation, that's the papancha sanya sankha. The book I mentioned earlier is really all about unpacking those words, papancha sanya sankha, that beset a person. If nothing is found there to delight in, welcome, and hold to, this is the end of the underlying tendency to, and it lists 7 underlying tendencies: lust, aversion, views, big one, doubt, conceit, desire for existence, and ignorance. So this is another, as we're looking at our different weighting pools that we might go through, is to look at what is the underlying tendency that is kind of motivating this exchange. The path of, as I go through my filing cabinet, am I turning to the folder that has metta in it? Or am I turning toward the folder that has raga, attachment, in it? Now, so this is what I'll be going over the next few weeks, and on Thursday here we'll look at, we'll do some meditation with tuning our perceptions so that they are wholesome, tuning our perceptions so that, gosh, life just gets so much easier and happier based on not a diluted lens, but a lens that's really aligned with the Buddha's teaching. A lot of the stress of the messages that we're getting in the world become less injuring, because I'm not taking me so seriously, as like the landing place is more amorphous. And then I'm not having this contact that is becoming solidified, reified, made real. And then I grasp on and say, now I must do this or that or this in regard to protect myself. Or I'm not saying we don't do things, but the avenue, the perceptions that start us down the path become more and more wholesome. So let's see here. I want to make sure we still have time. Let's see. I already showed you this tool a little bit earlier, the Digital Poly Dictionary. Here the papancha is endless conceptualization. So back at the very beginning, when we were talking about these four things of is this perception leading to decline? Is this leading to a stability? Is it, for ultimate penetration? The different four there. I think we're in the first one here. When we're in papancha, we're in decline because we're not leading to a cooling, a stilling. So a lot of what we will work with is Nibbāna, the non-proliferation, the stilling. So this is a way that our perceptions can become less sticky and less problematic when we work with that. And I don't remember what this last tab is, so we'll just click and see. Okay, yeah, this is more about what we'll get into, the relief of a quiet mind. So that's what we'll start to look at. And you can see it if it's not good for your time zone on another time this Thursday with the meditation practice. And then going into the next weeks, we will look further at Sanya, Vipallasa, Anusaya, Papancha. A lot of vocab this week in our shallow dive of the swimming pool of perceptions, or maybe it's really the oceans. Okay, so I'm going to stop the screen share. And if there are any questions or comments particular to this collection of the waters we'll investigate, please share now. If you want to go into more of a personal look at things, we'll have space to do that and not have it public on the YouTube for those of you who are present today. So any comments that feel aligned or questions that will go on to the recording, feel free to unmute and ask or state now. Joseph.
Thank you, Venerable. I was always interested if someone might be also interested in cultivating wisdom and understanding of perceptions by kind of investigating like a loving kindness meditation, like a guided loving kindness meditation, and then kind of explaining what each part of the meditation is in relationship to perception. So, for example, Ayakema has many loving kindness meditations that are specifically focused on visualization.
Mm-hmm.
And I just always thought it would be inspiring to kind of have a dialogue about what's the process that's being shown in this guided meditation. Thank you.
Oh, Joseph, I think you were taking a peek at my notes for Thursday. That's wonderful. Yes, metta is a huge tool, all the Brahma Viharas, but metta in particular with the loving kindness. We don't want to have the term rose-colored glasses because that's really putting a distortion on it. However, metta is an antidote to misguided perceptions that we have cultivated internally and in our society. So metta is a huge realignment tool for our practices around sanya. And we'll do some of that on Thursday, where we look at how the way that we we condition the mind, the body to start our meditation practice. And I do this not just in meditation where I'm internally going, but also in a interactive. So it's not just meditative, it's also interactive. So conditioning the heart. I've given this example before where I was rejoicing at a particular alms round where we had some Vietnamese bhikkhunis and we'd received the alms in front of a Vietnamese restaurant run by some Cambodian men. And so they also knew the Vietnamese language. And so that day, those bhikkhunis said, let's do the Anumodana, the rejoicing chant, in Vietnamese. So I can't participate, but I had so much mudita, so much joy in this. And the way we were situated was The Cambodian men were on one side of it was a very wide sidewalk, and then we were closer to the storefront, the bhikkhunis, and they were chanting. And this woman walked down the sidewalk right through the middle of us. There was space behind us, but she rode right through the middle of us, and I was the closest as she was passing through. And so she says in front of me as she's passing, "As if you have nothing better to do." And I'm imagining the tone now, but I heard through my lens of mudita and metta, "As if you have nothing better to do. You see me." And so this lens of metta. Now, quickly, my mind also thought, oh, the angle at which she's coming from with those words is maybe not the way I'm picking it up, but my heart met her with metta. And so, yes, this is really, really important in our meditation practice, but it doesn't stop there. We do the meditation practice because it's conditioning us for two things. One, being out in the world, and the other, having a stilling of the mind so that we can actually achieve the Nibbana. Achieve is a wrong word. Perceive the Nibbana that we started this whole sutta line with. So yes, we will get into that, and it is extremely important. And it's actually why I started this series, because you've touched on the key element for me in my practice is the incorporation of metta and balancing that with the wisdom. Other on-recording comments or questions? Okay, I'm going to turn the